Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Talk with Kiet podcast, where we connect people, ideas, and capital to make a difference in the world. Now, today I'm extremely blessed to have the well-known branding expert, Allen Adamson, with me. Now, Adam is a noted industry expert in all disciplines of branding. He has worked with a broad spectrum of consumer and corporate businesses in industries ranging from, packaging goods and technologies to hospitality and entertainment, healthcare, and financial services, an industry that's near and dear to my heart. He's also the co-founder and managing partner of a marketing strategy and activation firm called Metaforce. And he's also an NYU adjunct professor with the Berkeley Center for Entrepreneurship, where he works with student entrepreneurs about crafting the stories of the startups ideas they have. And what's most interesting about Allen is he's a well-established author. He's published multiple books on branding, which I highly recommend. Books from Brand Simple, Brand Digital, The Edge, 50 Tips from Brands That Lead, and Shift Ahead, how the best companies stay relevant in a fast-changing world. And he's actually writing a new book that will come out in January called Seeing the How, which I love to ask him a bit about later on. And with that, Allen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's fun to be here.
No, it's amazing. I was telling you earlier, I was at a coffee shop with a close friend called Evan Z. Booker, right? Evan's an amazing individual. And we had a 3-hour chat at a Starbucks about life. And at the end of it, I'm like, Evan, if this conversation was recorded, you know how many people would benefit from it? I'm like, I'm going to start a podcast, right? And that's really what launched it all. And these conversations we've been having has definitely been extremely fruitful for many of the audience. And typically what we start here is really start with the journey and the career journey. And so Allen, tell us a bit about your career journey and how you got to where you are now.
Thanks. I would love to do that. I think one of the things, the headline for the career journey is don't think you know what you want to do when you're 20 or 21. You can sort of have some ideas, but don't be so laser focused because it's unlikely you know what you want to do. And don't think of what job you want. Back up and say, what do you like doing? What do you have fun doing? And then think about where you can apply that. So I went to school. I was going to be I thought I wanted to do film. I went to school and I thought I was going to be a filmmaker, and going through the process, it became clear that, I thought I was pretty good at film, but there were people who were really great at making films. And those people also enjoyed making films 24/7, 7 days a week. So they'd be there Saturday night making films till 3 a.m. And I enjoyed doing it during the week, but I didn't love doing it 24/7. Nonetheless, I enjoyed the process. But when I graduated, there weren't 3 offers from Hollywood executives saying, come out to LA and, become a movie maker. So I began to think about what I wanted to do. And, you get hints early in your career that you have to pay attention to. So one of the hints I got was, like many students who are lucky, you can spend a semester overseas at many universities. And I decided to do a junior year in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And I came back and I spoke to the people organizing this trip. And they said, "Did you enjoy the trip?" I go, "Yeah. Why don't more students sign up for this?" And they say, we have trouble getting students to go to our program in Florence and London and Paris. I said, why wouldn't any student? It's the same price for tuition. You live with a family. Yeah. And so I did a little project for them. And I realized that they were telling the facts to students, saying, here's what you benefit, here's what you can study in Florence, and here's what you can study in. But they weren't getting people lined up at the door. So it was my first hint that sometimes marketing is more than just listing that you have a program in Florence and a program in Paris and a program in Amsterdam. Just telling people what you have doesn't get them knocking down your door. And I sort of enjoyed that process of working with them to say, why don't more kids sign up for a semester abroad? Why aren't they turning people away? Anyway, so I graduate and I start looking for opportunities, and I didn't find what I wanted. So I punted the ball, as they say, down the field and went to business school at NYU. And coming out of that, though, the same dilemma. I learned a lot of things at NYU, but I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And then when you interview, you meet different companies and you see different cultures. And when I was looking at those opportunities, one came along that sort of felt right, and it actually combined the two things I just talked about. It was a company that made films, but also did marketing. It was an ad agency called Ogilvy and Mather. And at that time, joining that firm I wasn't making the films. There were creative people making the films.
Yeah.
But it allowed me to stay close to creativity, but solve problems like I had tasted when I spoke to the people and tried to understand why kids didn't want to do more juniors abroad. It was solving conceptual problems that didn't make sense. Why if you tell people that it's great to spend a semester in Florence and you'll learn a lot and have a great experience, people don't say, yeah, let me do that. No, I want to be there for the college football game, and I've never been there before, and why would I want to do that? So you have to get beyond the rational. So those two factors got me started.
And so you started there, and then you became a senior exec at Landau, right?
Yeah, so I started in advertising, and you learn a lot of things.
Yeah.
At that point, Ogilvy was a great place to learn, mostly how to get your thinking in writing, because they don't sell anything, they sell ideas.
Yeah.
To clients as to how to market their products, as to how to advertise. And you find that when you're trying to convince somebody that your idea is the best idea, you have to learn how to tell that story. And then you have to learn how to make that idea come to life and do it well. So it was a great launch pad for me to learn business, because key in business is communication and writing clearly and communicating clearly. And then I went on to do that at a larger company called Unilever, which is a packaged goods company. They make Dove soap, and there you learn how to market products that are not that different. Most people, if the company felt there was huge differences between Dove and the other brands, those consumer packaged goods don't have big product differences. So there you learn to really understand the consumer. And after that, I ended up at Landor with a few.
And talk about that corporate career journey because you were there for a lot of years, right? Like,
yeah, and I think one of the things you have to keep in mind is that once you get into a company, you are competing, quote unquote, or your colleagues are all rough. They're all very qualified, and success is about doing it better. But you no longer, So what I found, and this is obvious, is that when I was at Unilever, I enjoyed learning about consumer packaged goods and marketing consumer goods through supermarkets and mass merchandisers and doing ads and working with PR companies and working on promotion. But when I went running in the morning in Central Park, I didn't think about work that much. I thought about other things. But all of a sudden I was competing with people. I was having lunch at the company cafeteria, and all they wanted to talk about at lunch was, what are we going to do for the fall promotion, and how are we going to sell more product at this grocery store? They loved it. And I found it interesting, and I learned a lot, but I wasn't thinking about the problem running in the park. And so to be successful, I think in any career, you have to be all in. You have to think about it not when you're in front of the computer between 9 and 5 or whatever the hours are. You have to, you have to want to talk to friends about it. You have to be thinking about it when you're taking a walk in the park. Because if you're not passionate about what you're doing, no matter how talented you are, you won't succeed. So the key tying back to my first point Understanding what you love doing. For me, it was creativity and solving non-linear problems where you couldn't add up three numbers and say 5 + 6 + 7 is this.
Yeah,
You,
yeah,
you know, you have to add the numbers up and they don't make sense. You have to look to solve it in a non-linear way. Understanding that those things I like to do, understanding creativity was something I liked, understanding working and communicating with people was something I liked, and I was perhaps good at a few things. And then once you understand the building blocks of what you enjoy doing, then you can sort of say, now where can I do that? And it could be at a big company like Unilever. It could be at a small startup. It doesn't matter where you do it, but pay attention to what you'll be doing and make sure not only could you do it for a little bit, it's a marathon. So you
yeah,
could fake being interested in anything for a couple hours, but make sure that a year from now or a year and a half from now, when somebody asks you what do you do, you can't wait to tell them, and you want to talk about it at dinner with them, not like, oh, it's boring at work. I was just there today. Let's talk about this.
yeah,
To be successful, you have to, live and breathe it every day and really find it fun. And if you do that, obviously you will outrun, or it's a tortoise and hare thing. You'll be the tortoise that will keep on going because you love doing it. And the people that are just in it to make a few dollars or the short term will be the hare, run very fast, but lose interest and stop by the side of the road and read a paper and
yeah,
do
yeah,
something
yeah.
else where you're going to be the one driven to finish the marathon.
Now, you know, people though at times may have this preconceived notion of what they're passionate about, right? Like how do you help them open up their eyes on things they may not know? Because this balance of loving what you do, good at what you do, and finding the marketplace for what you do. Right? In a way, you've hit all three with your career. But someone starting out today, like how could they, find that journey aside from being a TikTok star?
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's one. It's really hard to find out what you like to do early on.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
part of it is to try a number of things and to get out of your bubble. And to
yeah,
some extent, speak to people. Really, don't just take the first job that, yes, sometimes you have to take the first job. But,
yeah,
if you only talk to people that are interviewing you and trying to fill a position, then you're constantly just selling yourself and say, I should do a podcast because I'm really good at asking questions. But if you spend some time saying, look, tell me about what it's like to do a podcast. What do you do every day? And you can interview them even if they're not looking. So, talk to a lot of people in different industries, zoom out, and
yeah,
don't
yeah,
worry about selling yourself, but try to really what do you do every day? What's your morning like? What do you hate about what you do? What do you like about what you do? Give me a typical afternoon. Show me a meeting. Show me a presentation you put together. If you can do a little research before you start looking for a job where you're not trying to say, oh, I could do that and I'm great at that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And the trick is to widen the lens, to talk to people. I would never want to, work in a financial firm. It sounds so boring.
yeah,
It's still a good idea to talk to 4 or 5 people in financial firms to learn about that. I would never want to work in a creative business. It's too crazy and there's too much uncertainty. Yeah, all right, but talk to a few people in that industry, either friends of your family or connect with people on social media or friends of friends, because be a reporter early on and investigate
yeah,
and understand the businesses, because your notion of what people really do at an insurance company or at a startup or at a bank, you're likely completely wrong.
yeah, yeah.
uh,
That's
and
right.
you'll be better at saying I want to be at an insurance company than a bank if you've spoken to both, as opposed to, well, I saw a bank on television ads and they seem clever, and I always like going to the ATM, so I want to work at a bank.
Yeah, yeah. I have to ask this question because I was asked to ask this. Like, how real is the world of marketing compared to Mad Men, the show?
I think it was real back 30 years ago or 40 years ago when they filmed it.
Yeah, yeah,
It was real in the way that most clients came to ad agencies to do lots of things: advertising, the packaging, the where they should sell it. And that's changed a little bit because now there are specialties. But the thing I think is most teachable about, if you ever go back and watch Mad Men, is how hard it is to sell an idea. There's one episode I would recommend actually your viewers go click on YouTube. It's where Don Draper is selling a product to an old firm called Kodak, and it's called the Carousel. And he was talking about how this was a projector to show slides, which were a type of film.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he does this pitch to Kodak, telling them why they should call it the Carousel and how to market it. And the engineers, and this is incredibly typical, had come in and say, well, here's our way to show these pictures. And it's a round plastic thing. And look how many slots it has. And they were completely talking about the product design. And they wanted to talk about how well it showed the pictures and how easy it was to use. But in the episode, and this is actually pretty close to reality, Don Draper talks about how it allows you to travel your memories from beginning to end and do it in a circle. And it's an incredibly emotional pitch. And how he pitched that idea to Kodak when they really wanted to talk about the type of plastic that was used in the tray
Yeah, yeah.
is incredibly true today and forever. And what makes, for me, advertising and marketing fun, because most people will focus on, here's what my product does, here's how it works. It's 10% faster, it's 4% cheaper, you can buy it at Target. And the biggest marketing successes are zooming back and saying, well, how does this fit in someone's life? And in that episode called the Kodak Carousel, Don Draper unlocks that the real reason people take pictures is to relive memories and
Yeah.
to capture memories and understand that.
That's right. I forgot which episode this was when he's trying to pitch the client and it says, if you don't believe in Jesus, I can't put the Jesus in you. I'm leaving.
Well, part of the challenge is, which is I mentioned earlier, one of the things you learned, or I learned when I was in advertising, is that yes, you can have a great idea, but getting somebody to believe it's a great idea and getting that idea to be made, because often that idea is very different than everyone else.
That's
No
right.
one is doing it. And you're telling a client you're going to spend millions of dollars to make this little film. It seems silly and crazy. And no one else is doing it. And there's no way to test it until you make it. Now there are some ways to test it, but
Yeah, yeah.
it requires you to set it up. Here's what the challenge is. Here's what we're trying to get people to feel. Here's why getting people to feel that memories are more important than plastic trays is important. Here's why memories drive why people take pictures. It's so they can show their and sharing and then reliving the day of the wedding. And once you understand that and you can present that in a rational way, PowerPoint or whatever it is, and get people to track. Yeah, I buy that. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. And then so when you get to the punchline, we're going to tell a story and make you cry, as opposed to telling you this plastic is 10% better at holding pictures than the other brand. Then you can get there. So I think it's realistic. Some people, even if you give them all the facts, just can't make a decision that they can't justify to say, look, I want to do this because this is what everyone in the category is doing. My three competitors are all talking about how great their credit card is. So I want to talk about my great credit card, and that you can use it anywhere, and that you get online statements. So sometimes a client is so risk averse that they're unable to do something different than everyone else. And of course, marketing is driven and branding is driven by doing something different that matters. And if you just do what all your competitors do, which gets back to personal branding, if you say, I want this job because I went to this school and I work hard and I got a B+ in business strategy, everyone is going to have those three reasons going
That's
for the
right.
job. So you have to think harder than that.
So to transition to, the core of this podcast is really about the art of branding. But before we go there, like, how do you go from being an exec at a big marketing agency to being a well-published author to talk about branding? And then we'll touch on, what are some of the key aspects to building a good and strong brand?
Um, so earlier on in my career, Landor was in a business very similar to an ad agency of trying to help clients tell their story in a more distinctive yet different way, but not just Dove soap, companies, organizations, nonprofits. And when you do that, you hire a consultant or an advisor, and Landor was a firm of advisors and people that could do that. But you're often looking out down the road. You're saying, I want to be seen as a very strong, competent bank. And to get people to do that, they have to trust you and
Yeah.
believe that you are um, um, going to give them the right advice. And at that point in my career, I was younger, and my competitors all had big names. So I would open the Wall Street Journal, and I would see, you know, my competitors and their companies listed in articles and quoted. And I went into a pitch once, and I presented all the reasons I felt we could help this client. And on the side, I saw one of my competitors had left a book in the conference room. And it became clear that to have credibility in that business, they needed to perceive me and the company as having expertise. So I said, look, I need to, while I'm pretty good, I think, at doing what I'm doing, I need to build my personal brand up and our company's reputation up. So I, began to think about a book and said, well, if I could write a book, that would give me more, quote unquote, as they say, gravitas and permission for people to believe that I could actually do this. And I began to not only talk to clients, I began to call up reporters at the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or CNBC and say, look, this is what I do. If you're ever writing a story about a new company, I'm happy to give you a perspective. And that doesn't happen overnight. But over time, I started to do that. So that's how I went from just being, I think, pretty good at doing something to starting to build my personal brand to allow me to do more and allow the company to do more.
Yeah. And how important is today in terms of, I know there's a corporate brand, but there's also a personal brand, right? And how they interrelates, especially with entrepreneurs. Like, what's your view on that?
Well, I think, the challenge is when you ask, it goes back to when you interview for a job. Most people will tell you what they've done. They write their resume, say, I went to this school, I worked at this company for 3 years, I worked at this company for 2 years, I got promoted one. They'll tell a linear story and just give you the facts, which anyone can see on LinkedIn. and and when you zoom out and you look at people's LinkedIn profile, everyone has the same story. Maybe a different school, maybe they were at one firm 3 years, one firm 4 years, maybe they got promoted one. But fundamentally, it's let me tell you about myself by listing the things I've done and the titles I had, which are similar to everyone else's titles. And then you telling them, I want this job because I think I'll be good at it. Or I know a lot about the beer business. I've been selling beer. I've been at Budweiser. So to me, that's about personal branding and saying, yes, telling what you've done is necessary, but insufficient. You've got to. People want to. When I interviewed folks, I want to know who you are, what you're good at, what wakes you up in the morning, what you're passionate about. What do you care about? So I think for anybody, including companies, you have to get into who are you and why should I care? And how to answer that is why should I care is not a rational listening of this product has is a better this is a better cell phone because it has a better screen and it battery lasts longer and the case is stronger. You can spend your whole life and yes, sometimes you'll come up with a better case or a better screen but ultimately you have to say, this is a better solution for you because it will make your life better here, or here's why you should buy it. And it's an interesting story, not it has more pixels per inch than the other phone.
That's right. And given, you mentioned the phone, and when I think about the evolving change of technology and reach, right? What we mentioned Mr. Beast, right? He launched a candy bar, and now it became like the world's best-selling candy bar. He launched Mr. Beast Burger Joint. Now there's over 10,000 franchise, and Kylie Jenner is now a billionaire building her makeup brand. Like how are traditional corporate brands now competing with these social media influencers when they have hundreds of millions of followers?
Yeah, so let's zoom out together on that.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you go back in the time machine past Mad Men, you know, Mad Men, that was a moment in time when people got their information in a very bizarre way. 30 years ago, they sat down in the family room or in the kitchen and they watched television. And there weren't that many choices. And, surprisingly, this may surprise some of your listeners, they actually they actually paid attention. So when there was an ad and they actually believed some of it. And so the way you got information was just telling the story and people would watch it. Now, of course, no one watches ads that much anymore. But before that journey, before people sat and just said, "Oh yeah, let me go buy some of that Dove soap. It looks like it's great for your skin. I have to pick some of that. I'll stop using Ivory." People got their information by hanging out in the backyard and saying to their neighbor, what do you use when you're, cutting the grass, or what type of, my car is not working. Where do you take it? So word of mouth was the way everyone got information a long time ago. And now we're just back to that. Now more people are interested in why you buy something than the company saying it's great. But the challenge about word of mouth today is that there's so much content out there that if you just say, I'm pretty good at making a phone, it lasts 4 hours, and you can drop it, and if you're just telling an average story, no one shares average. No one says, "Hey, Alan's got a phone that lasts 4 hours, and if you drop it, it sometimes doesn't break." No one shares average. People only share extraordinary things on social media. Only, you hear about this. So if you're not doing something different and extraordinary, no one shares. And they follow people they trust, whether it's Kylie Jenner or others, and say, "I can't figure out what's the best makeup, but if Kylie says, this is making her look great, I'm not going to read the label and see how many ingredients this makeup has. I'm just going to say, I want to look like Kylie. I'm going to buy that." So we're back to the future, but it's much harder now than just going to your backyard fence and asking your neighbor, because when you go to your fence, it's online and everyone's there, and everyone, so between attention deficit and communication overload, telling a story today requires you to share something extraordinary that's different, that people will want to say, "Hey, did you see that ad? Or did you see this product? Or why are you still using that phone? This phone folds," or whatever it is. You have to get to that point, and it's incredibly hard.
Yeah. So what is your advice then? Because you teach this to student entrepreneurs at NYU. When you're building a startup, you're launching a product. Like, how important is it getting the right product market fit versus getting the messaging right and building the brand upfront?
Well, ultimately, any product has to solve a problem. So I often start with, if your product didn't exist, what problem would your target consumer have? Who is that target, and what problem would they have? So if there's not a problem they're solving, you're already in trouble because, oh no, this does the same as everything else. I just think they're going to like it more because it's green, or blue, So you have to make sure you're clear on what problem. I was working for many years ago for Pizza Hut. And they were saying, "Look, everyone likes our pizza." They showed the research; it tastes great, it's hot, And one of the moderators or research people we were working with said, "Well, let's ask a different question." And they asked consumers, Well, you've been going to Pizza Hut for a long time. Yes. Do you like the pizza? Yeah. What do you like about it? Oh, the cheese is good, and it's always, the crust is crunchy. And then she asked, well, if Pizza Hut went out of business, what would you do? Oh, I just go to Papa John's. In other words, they didn't care. In other words, it wasn't, so you have to, so if you don't have this product, you're trying to launch this. And if you're not there, what problem do people have? That's job one. Who has that problem? Not occasionally, but who is going to be really have this problem? And once you can identify, the product and the fit and the target, then you have to tell their story, because I meet with lots of kids, and they'll spend 15 minutes telling me why their solution is better. And the reality is, in the world I just talked about, you have 4 seconds, 5 seconds to at least start your story. And so I help them try to, well, it's nice that your screen has more pixels, and it's nice your battery lasts a little longer, and it's nice you can drop your phone underwater. But there are many companies that do that. We have to get to, how are you going to start the story that are going to get people, oh, let me hear more. And so often it's a reductive exercise. What do you focus on? And most importantly, create a little pyramid. How do you start the story? I want to tell you about something that will blank, blank, blank. Here it is.
Yeah.
And when you're into developing a company, you've got so many things going on. You have lots of stuff in your head, and you've got to elevate it and say, all right, clear my head. And if I were talking to my Aunt Bertha and I had to tell her this story, I wouldn't start with, about 4 years ago, I developed an algorithm that did this. And then most people tell you the story from the beginning. And then I was this. And there's so much detail that by the time you get to the punchline, they're already on their phone or zoned out or thinking about, what, tomorrow. So you've got to short and simple, which is the title of my first book, Brand Simple Still Is True. If you can't get your story simple, it doesn't matter if it's good, because no one will hear it.
That's right. By the way, that nugget was amazing. And I'm sure a lot of people listening, like, you just put a lot of money in a lot of people's pockets. But by the way, that was awesome. Now, but essentially you mentioned, Pizza Hut go out of business, you go to Papa John's. So in the world of today, and talk about payment platform, right? Cash apps, Apple Pay, etc. How do you stand out with your messaging?
It's really tough, because all those things do this. If I want to send money to my kids, which I need to do occasionally, there are many ways to do it. I can Zelle them, I can Venmo them, I could, we don't have to get into all those brands, but ultimately all those apps function the same way. Yes, some may be easier to use, some may be accepted more, but ultimately everyone is running to the same thing. And I actually think Cash App recently did something sort of interesting. Cash App launched a line of fashion clothing that young kids may want to wear, and they're selling shirts and hats and sweatshirts that are branded Cash App, and people look at that. What? But ultimately, I heard about Venmo through my kids saying, "Dad, can you Venmo me some money?" And it wasn't about, the security is good on Venmo and the app is easy to use. It was just something it was their form of money.
It's like a verb now, right? Venmo.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you're not going to, if you think about, as I was saying before, what you do, how you do it, who you are, or why you do it, the what and how, most people are doing the same thing. So to some extent, financial services is somewhat what we call a badge brand. People buy certain brands because they want to wear it. Beer companies, whether it's, Stella hat or, and ultimately financial services are somewhat like that. Way back, again, your listeners can Google this. When American Express was a real big successful brand, there's big, they were marketing credit cards against Visa and MasterCard, the American Express card, which is still out there today. But the way they were marketing, Visa was saying we're accepted to these stores and we get but American Express decided to market it more like a celebrity brand. And they had famous actors saying, I never leave home without the American Express card. So it had a panache, it had sort of a Kylie Jenner feel that it was no rational reason, but famous celebrities, Sean Connery used the American Express card. So young people back in my generation said, gee, I want to be like Sean Connery. Why would I use a Visa or a MasterCard? I'm going to use his card. And so they got onto the notion that, financial service wasn't always rational. I think Cash App is a brilliant move to say it's going to be hard to differentiate between the functionality of Cash App and Apple Pay and Venmo, but let me try to make my brand, Cash App, cooler than the other brands. And making it cooler is not just saying I'm cool. Making it cooler is, and ultimately, in a word of going back to where you started, no one's watching advertising. But if you're at a party with some friends and someone's wearing a Cash App sweatshirt, you say, what's that? And if that happens to be the coolest person at the party, you're going to want to pay on Cash App more than you're going to want to pay on Apple Pay.
Yeah. Just like Google giving out boxes in the late 90s, I remember at campus.
Yeah, exactly. So part of it is, lots of people in the financial service business, are very rational and they're thinking all the reasons you may want to buy. But sometimes you have to take that jump to an emotional benefit, which is it's cool or fun or hip people are using it. To be successful, obviously, if you're just hip and cool but don't work, or you can't download the app, or you transfer money and it ends up in a foreign country to some, or it's easy to make a mistake that you transfer it, they don't check with you twice. Do I really want to transfer you money? So you have to get the product basics right, but the successful brands often elevate beyond pure product functionality and tell a story about why you should care or their purpose or some other dimension beyond, it's you can transfer $20 to your friend quickly.
Yeah. And let's backtrack a little bit because you transition from the corporate world to being world renowned in terms of being an author on branding, etc. And then you went down the entrepreneurship journey, which is this channel's about a lot.
Right.
Like, tell me about that experience of starting. Did I pronounce it right? Metaforce.
Metaforce, yeah. I'm very grateful to Mark Zuckerberg for picking Meta as a name. So
did he pay you for that, by the way?
No. I fortunately I own the URL, so eventually I'm hoping he'll just say, look, I need to buy the Metaforce name, and in which case I'll start a podcast. So it is an easy and a hard journey. I worked for big companies all my life, big ad agencies, big consumer good companies. Landor was a relatively big company. It was owned by a global holding company called WPP. So, and there was some benefit in having that. Of course, I knew that I would get paid every week or every month. I knew that if I did a good job, there'd be, so there was certainty, but there was also uncertainty because at the beginning of every year at Landor, WPP management would say, well, you had a very good year last year, Alan, you made $10. Are you going to make, so this year, I think you should try to make $12. But the problem there was that those $10 were problems we solved for 10 clients. And once you solve their problem, they're not going to come back and say, Alan, solve that problem again. So every year we started with a relatively empty tank. When people say, well, I'm going to work for Landor, what am I going to be working on? And the answer was, I don't know. We're going to get a call. A company's going to have a problem. We're going to go talk to them, and then we're going to help them get a solution. But I couldn't tell you in advance what that would be. There was no people are going to buy a hamburger on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We didn't know what type of clients we would have, when they would come in, how big they would be. Of course, you had to win them. Yeah. And so even though I felt I had done that all my life, there was a big change when I went and said, let me try that on my own, because now I face the same problem and I don't get, a weekly salary from somebody. I have to figure out, what client is going to call, who, and how do we win that? So being an entrepreneur requires you to have more confidence that you will be successful, but gets you detached from the total, feeling that if I work 5 years, sit in a cubicle, in year 6, I'll get a bigger cubicle, Year 8, I'll get a bigger cubicle. It is less projectable. You could
Yeah.
either be very successful, somewhat successful, or completely unsuccessful. You have to be comfortable with that risk profile, waking up Monday morning and saying, I don't know what I'll be doing a week from now or a
Yeah.
month from now. And I think there's no way to get ready for that, but I did it, and I've enjoyed it because it is more volatile, but more interesting because when you're up, you're really enjoying it. And when you're down, you can't blame anyone else. You've got to solve it yourself. Or with our team at Metaforce, we solve it ourselves because um, business is not a linear challenge.
Yeah. And what would be one or two things that surprised you on the entrepreneurship journey that you never expected?
That's a great question. Since Landor was actually somewhat entrepreneurial, even though we're holding in a big company, I
Yeah.
guess the need to constantly reinvent yourself. Um, what worked 2 years ago for us at Metaforce is working less well now. And last year we thought of something new, and that's working better. So, part of I think the biggest challenge in business is, oh, I'm going to do what I did last year. Last year was good. I wore a blue striped shirt. I went to
Yeah.
3 meetings, and I
Yeah.
did the PowerPoint deck like this. And let's do that again because it worked last year. And there is an incredible gravitational pull to always do what worked and just fine tune that. But if your whole life is about fine tuning what you did yesterday, all of a sudden you'll do okay for a while, but then you'll fall off a cliff because 5 other people are trying to do the same thing and they'll do it in a completely fresh and different way. And by the time you see that, you can copy them, but then you'll just be copying them. So I think part of success in entrepreneurship is to have a bit of the Andy Grove, who was a former CEO of Intel.
Yeah.
Only the paranoid survive. You have to assume that what you did last week is obsolete. And if you're not constantly thinking about new ways to do things, by the time your current way is not working, it's too late to reinvent yourself.
Yeah. And I guess the other aspect of entrepreneurship is, especially in the early stages, hiring top talent. Right. So what are some of your secrets to attracting the best and the brightest?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you're in a Metaforce is in a consulting business, you're selling thinking, you're selling ideas, you're not selling try my phone, use it for a week, and if it drops a call, I'll give you
Yeah.
a new one. You're
Yeah.
selling a conceptual prompt, and that all comes down to the people you have working with you. Do you have the best thinkers? Do you have the best research people? Do you have the best? And ultimately, that's what McKinsey's about. That's what um, uh, Accenture's about. That's what Ogilvy Mather's about, is collecting talent and having that be the best talent and having that talent work well together. Because there are two ways to get you can get a lot of superstars, and that's good. But sometimes superstars, if you look at all star sports, sometimes the superstars don't beat the team because teamwork is equally important to best in talent. So getting that balance right between very talented people, but that are great at both doing what they do, but also working as a team, it's incredibly hard. But ultimately, that separates one firm from another, in any category.
Yeah.
um, and creating a culture where I always early on at Ogilvy, you always wanted to hire somebody you were sure was smarter than you, you were sure was going to work harder than you, and you were sure that would be fun to work with and that would be good for the team. And I think ultimately looking for giving people a chance to grow and learn and do something and fail, but try new things is a way to attract talent. If you'd say, look, you're coming to my firm and fill out this form, and then you're going to fill out this form, and then I'm going to make you do it again. And if you have an idea, don't tell me about it. I know what I'm doing. Just do what I tell you. If you have that sort of mentality, you will get okay people, but you won't get great people. So talent is the big differentiator in the world, and attracting talent is really hard. and part of it is giving whatever talent you have the chance to grow, coach, and learn, and giving them giving them a playing field. Say, here's your playing field. Go, be all you can be. Go do it. Throwing them into the deep end usually sooner than they feel even they're ready.
Yeah, giving them that autonomy and sense of growth, right, and
Right.
opportunity.
Yeah.
No, that's
Easier said
awesome.
than done.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Now, let's touch back again on, you've come full circle with NYU, right? You went to NYU, and now you're an adjunct professor at NYU. Like, how did that happen? And I do want to touch on your view on education and where that's going in the future as well.
So that I used to do some guest lectures at NYU, and then that turned into actually teaching a class in advertising, and that ended up eventually working with the Berkeley Center for Innovation. So I've always enjoyed teaching. It's hard.
Yeah.
And it's hard because it's actually similar to the marketing challenge I face. Anyone you talk to in a classroom, getting there, or in a big group or a small group, getting their attention for 40 minutes, especially today when they've been tuned in to live in the TikTok world where they can pay attention to 3 things for 30 seconds, but can't pay attention to 1 thing for 10 minutes, is really hard. So you've got to think of yourself as, look, I've got a short time to get them engaged, and so you have to think of your message as a brand, because if you do what most people in business do, many people, as we say, PowerPoint them to death by showing 50 slides in 5 minutes. Here it is, click, and do this, click. Of course, you'll have everything on the PowerPoint slides, but nothing will get. And unlike when I went to NYU, I didn't have a laptop in front of me where the minute you get bored, you can just double click and go to Amazon or go to Netflix. Now, of course, anyone sitting in a classroom, yes, they have the laptop open and they have their phone open, and there are 14 screens they can look at. And if you're not capturing them in 8 seconds or 12 seconds or 15 seconds, they are changing channels and, texting 2 friends about what they're going to do after class.
Yeah. But what I love about you, and it's, everything goes back to first principles on the key ingredients of building a brand and grabbing attention. And that applies to a lot of things in life, as you alluded to.
Yeah, it's just hard. I think teaching is a torture test because, especially today, because they're all sitting, everyone's sitting there, they're busy, and sometimes what you're trying to communicate is not as exciting as Kylie Jenner showing you the latest toy. So
right.
I think it's a good torture test, but it's hard to do. And ultimately, it's about storytelling and starting a story with enough of a tell me more, as opposed to, Alan's going into why his iPhone works better again because the battery's there. Yeah, I've heard that before. Tune out. So
Yeah.
I think if everything you do is saying, look, I have one shot to make a 30-second impression today, 15 seconds. And how do I grab somebody's attention and then lead them in and want to get them engaged, which is what you have to do in a business, and engage more so they not only understand why your product is better, but they then want to double click and say, I'm going to try.
Yeah. And so, I mean, this may be a loaded question because you're in education as well. I had this chat with Ronnie Addis from Rutgers. So, what is your view on how we educate our kids, and how do you see that needs to change and evolve in the future, especially with all the technology that's around us?
Yeah, it's really tough. I'm not an expert, obviously not an expert in it, but my sense is it's less about giving them facts, because Siri or Google can give them facts faster, and they don't have to remember them all. You can just
That's right.
ask them, and more about sharing ideas and getting them in conversation, and talking about what's relevant to them and helping them learn to think, helping them learn to frame an idea, helping them learn to teach themselves. I think information is changing. So the best skill I can give students is, how do you solve a problem? How do you get the information? How do you find out about competitors? How do give them a framework and teach them how to fish, as opposed to giving them sort of give the people a fishing rod and instructions. Don't give them the fish. So don't give them 15 facts of how you build a brand and 10 stories for how you do an ad, because that's all going to change. Anything I tell them now is going to be irrelevant in 6 months, if I'm lucky, a year, or very lucky 2 years. So the best story is to give them a framework to learn how to re-educate themselves and relearn and do things differently every year, and a way to be a self-teacher and a self-student, not to wait for your professor to say, don't worry about reading it. Here are the top 10 things you need to know about a financial statement. I mean, some things you have to teach.
Yeah.
You have to create a way for them to be lifelong students, not to say, I finished NYU, got my degree, and I don't have to learn it. I don't have to do homework anymore. I don't have to study anymore. I don't have to read anymore. I'll just go do it. Because whatever you're doing will be irrelevant in a couple of years.
Yeah. Now, so, giving all your amazing, I'm sure the audience can't wait to go buy your book in January called Seeing the How. Not to give the whole shop away, but tell us a little bit about the book.
The book came actually as a result of me meeting with groups of entrepreneurial students over a couple of years at NYU, and lots of them came in not with, I've invented a new face cream that makes people younger. Lots of them came in with, I have this problem, and I took existing technology, and I'm going to solve this problem. This is not a great example. I don't know what I'm telling you. I met many years ago with some students who were from India and from Delhi.
Yeah.
And when they went home and they grew up, the air quality in Delhi has been going down, 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 down. And just walking around New Delhi has become hazardous on certain days. And so this team invented, they had 2 filters you could put in your nose. So when you're walking outside, this is pre-COVID when people were getting, you could breathe and, healthier. And they were marketing it to people visiting other cities that have this pollution. But it's an example of a problem they were solving. and what you can do is then, again, it was never about the filters. It was always about how you fit into someone's life. So, I forget what question were you asking that got me into that story? I went off on a tangent.
The book.
Oh, the book. So
Yeah.
lots of it this was not new technology. This was off the shelf 2 filters from 3M, but it was using 3M's technology in a new way that people hadn't put things in their nose before in a different city. So lots of marketing was not about inventing something new, but seeing what's out there and using it in different ways. So instead of wearing a mask, you would put these 2 little things in your nose. Whether it worked or not, we can leave that. So lots of students were coming to me with new ideas that were changing how we do things, not inventing new products. So Seeing the How is about looking at the marketplace, not saying, how do I invent a better phone with a better screen and maybe I'll make it faster? But Seeing the How is looking out in the marketplace and seeing problems and how you can solve them by changing how people behave and do things, not necessarily by being so focused on coming up with a new app that transfers money all the time. Zooming out from the product and looking at people's lives and seeing how you could change it. Yes, sometimes you have to invent something new, but it's often putting together 3 things that exist. I'll give a quick story. I took my car to get serviced a couple months ago or a year ago, and it used to be the same way all the time. You go to them, they do the service, and then they come out and say, here's a checklist. We check these things. They show you a list and all the things they did, and it's X dollars. All right, I didn't see you do it. I'm not going to open my hood and take it apart. And but all of a sudden, got a text from the dealership, and they say, "Here's we're under your car, Alan, and let me show you with a video with a with a phone camera or some app like that. Let me show you your brakes. They are a little tight here, and you see the metal is touching here. Let me show you your shocks. They're leaking here a little bit." And all of a sudden, they gave me a tour under my car of the 3 things they were going to fix, and as if I were walking under the car with them and had my hand on the brakes. And so when they showed me this video and said, "Here's what we did, and here's the new brake we put on," all of a sudden I believed everything they told me. Versus when I had originally gotten the bill and they checked these 3 boxes, I guess I had to believe them.
Yeah.
It was a perfect example of how didn't require them to do new technology. Everyone had a little camera on them on their phone, but changing how they talked about what they were doing to customers by not just telling them, but showing them. And so as you look at business today, look through the lens of how you can change how people do things, not can you invent a new app that will transfer money 2 seconds faster than the other guy.
No, that's awesome. And I'm sure a lot of people in this call would find the book extremely valuable. So we do look forward to the January release date. Now, lastly, where we typically end the podcast is really about, how can the audience help you? Like, what is your messaging and, the type of people you want to reach out to?
Well, we enjoy at Metaforce solving these nonlinear problems, helping big companies, small companies, startups get their story sharp, get it simple, get it sticky, and enable them to be successful. Not so much that we invented the idea they have a great idea, and hopefully they have a great way to deliver a promise and solve that problem. But the next big thing is being able to tell that story to customers, to employees, to recruits, because ultimately young companies, as we talked about earlier, yes, while they have a good idea, the most important ingredient for success is attracting talent to help them make that idea more successful.
That's right.
And so how do they tell their stories to get the best and brightest to join their company? How do they tell that story to get to venture capitalists to get more funding? How do they tell that story to customers? And how do they tell that story to people who've been customers who get them to want to, and getting that story focused, sharp, sticky, clear. And it's often changing. So just because you had it clear a year ago doesn't mean it's clear now, because there may be 3 similar stories that, oh yeah, you do that, but so do other people. Is what I love doing and what we do at Metaforce.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alan, for being on today. It's been extremely fruitful and valuable insights. I'm sure everyone like me, find it very, very fruitful. And as for the audience, if you're still on at this moment, typically I want to say thank you so much. I appreciate your continued support, and we hope to have these continued conversations to really add value to all of us that are on the entrepreneurship journey and really trying to make a difference in the world. Now, next week, I will have Chris White on our call. Just like Alan, Chris is a regular on CNBC. Chris's expertise, knowledge on the bond market. But Chris is actually also a serial entrepreneur, founding Viable EDU and BondClick. So Chris and I next week will talk about in a juncture of entrepreneurship and mental health, which is not really discussed enough, I would say. So it'll be a very exciting conversation next week. See you next week, and God bless, and thank you so much for your continued support.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.